quiet Sunday evening in the picturesque coastal town of Nairn, Scotland. The streets are peaceful, the air is crisp with the chill of late November, and inside a modest home on Crescent Road, a family is settling in for the night. As two young children play, their father, a respected banker, unwinds after a long day. Then a knock at the door, and within minutes a life is stolen, and Scotland is left with one of its most perplexing mysteries. Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. Today we're looking at the case of Alistair Wilson, an unsolved murder that has haunted investigators for nearly 2 decades. On the evening of November 28, 2004, 30-year-old banker Alistair Wilson was upstairs with his 2 young sons. He was going through their routine of brushing teeth, putting on pajamas, and reading stories as their bedtime quickly approached. His wife Veronica was downstairs straightening up the house from the day's activities and getting everything settled for a peaceful night. Then, around 7 p.m., there's a knock at the door. Veronica was a little surprised to have visitors that late, but it wasn't entirely unheard of. She walked over to open the door and she politely greeted the stocky man on the other side. From under his baseball cap, she could see that he was just a few years older than she and her husband. He politely greeted her back and asked to speak with Alistair. Alistair was a business banking manager, so he was constantly having meetings and answering calls. So Veronica thought nothing of it and quickly called him down. Alistair gets down the stairs and greets the man who, without a word, hands him a blue envelope and turns to walk away. It was odd, but Alistair had seen all types of personalities, so he just takes the envelope and closes the door behind him. He looks down and on the front it just says Paul, but the man asked for Alistair by name, so he goes ahead and looks inside. But the envelope is totally empty. Confused, tense, and annoyed that his time with his kids was just interrupted for this, he quickly goes outside and asks the stranger what this is all about. The man hadn't gotten very far, so Alistair calls out to him, and they approach one another, but just as Alistair gets within a few feet of the man, 3 gunshots ring out, and the man turns to calmly walk away. Veronica rushes outside to see her husband on the ground, bleeding out. He's been shot twice in the head and once in the chest. A father, a husband, a banker with no known enemies, gunned down on his own doorstep. But why? And more importantly, who? Veronica rushes inside and makes a desperate 999 call, Scotland's equivalent of 911 in the US. Her world is falling apart, and though paramedics and police arrive quickly, it feels like an eternity as she sits by Alistair's side, trying anything she can do to save his life. Paramedics quickly administer what help they're able as they load him into the ambulance to take him to the hospital. Meanwhile, police search for the shooter, but the trail's already cold. He's vanished. Alistair would shortly pass away in the hospital, leaving behind a devastated family and a mystery with no clear motive. Investigators are baffled by this case. Why an empty envelope? And what's the significance of the name Paul? Was it a message or an attempt of misdirection? 10 days after the shooting, a council road sweeper is doing routine maintenance on Seabank Road when they see something odd. As they dig it out, they can see that it's a 1920s pistol. It's a rare one, found in a drain half a mile away from where the shooting took place. It's an antique and not something you're likely to stumble across anywhere, much less a drain. So police run ballistic tests, and it's a match for the murder weapon. But who would use such an obscure firearm for a murder? The crime itself was chilling, but the deeper investigators dug, the stranger this case became. Investigators believed that the calm execution, the unusual weapon, the methodical escape, all pointed to a hired assassin. But why target Alistair, this 30-year-old banker? Was he silenced for knowing too much? Or did he just deny a loan to the wrong person? Police found no financial wrongdoing on Alistair's part, but some suspect that he may have been a whistleblower that shined the light on some other dangerous people. Another possibility is that someone was angry over a decking project outside the Havelock Hotel, which Alistair had objected to. Would someone really take that drastic of revenge over that sort of dispute? Still, others continue to wonder about the name Paul that was written on the envelope. Was the killer at the wrong house, targeting the wrong man? But he had asked for Alistair by name. But one witness report gives a clue. A month before the murder, 2 men were seen on Nairn Beach holding a gun. One man was in his 20s, and the older was between 40 and 60 years old. The man Victoria met at the door looked to be around 40. Could it be that the older man was the killer? Were they testing the weapon that would later destroy a family? Again, just a few days after the murder, a man was sitting in a bar enjoying a drink and unwinding when he starts to tune in to the sound of crying just outside. Now, the front of the bar opened to the public, so it was easy to hear what was going on the streets. The crying was coming from an elderly man, and it wasn't just crying, it was full-on weeping. The witness could hear him saying, "My son did something bad." Could this be the key to the case? Unfortunately, this case offered no identifiable motives. Alistair had no known enemies, no criminal ties, and no apparent reason to be targeted. If that wasn't enough, there were no security cameras in the area, and the killer left no DNA, no fingerprints. Then there's the murder weapon. Police were unable to trace the gun, so even that gave them no leads. Then there's Veronica's account. She said the man was likely in his 40s. He had a stocky build, and he was about 5'6" to 5'10". But the average height of a man in Scotland is 5'9". So, though police were glad that they had an eyewitness, it didn't narrow down the search very much. And eventually, this case went cold. For nearly 2 decades, investigators struggled to find the motive. But in 2022, they turned their focus to something that had been in plain sight all along. A neighborhood dispute that may have turned deadly. In the summer of 2004, just months before his murder, Alistair Wilson lodged a formal complaint against the Havelock Hotel. It was a pub and guest house directly across from his home. The hotel had recently constructed an outdoor decking area in its parking lot. Alistair was concerned that the deck would bring in more noise and litter and more disruption to the quiet street where his family lived. By Friday, November 26th, word of his complaint had spread through the community. A lot of businesses, including Havelock Hotel, were counting on this deck to bring in bigger crowds. That weekend, the Havelock Hotel's bar was buzzing with conversation about Wilson's opposition. Now, some dismissed it as trivial neighborhood disagreement, but others, they took it personally. Then, just 48 hours later, a man knocked on Alistair Wilson's door. In April of 2022, police announced a major shift in their focus. They now believe Alistair's murder was linked to his personal life, not his career in banking. In the Havelock Hotel dispute, it was now at the center of their investigation. But still, years later in 2025, Alistair's widow Veronica and his children still wait for answers. There is yet to be an arrest in this case. The man who knocked on Alistair Wilson's door that night is still out there, and someone knows the truth. And if you do, it's time to come forward and give his family the closure that they desperately need and absolutely deserve. That's it for today's episode of Legends May Live. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and send to a friend who loves a good mysterious tale. Until next time, keep your eyes open and keep a lookout, because legends may live.